Good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Aims of Education Address for 2001. I'm John Boyer, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome all of you again to the college, all of our students and faculty and staff who are returning after a very challenging, but I think an important year in the history of the college and the history of the university. And I think we're all looking forward to a great year and to celebrate. It's so great to be able to come together again and see each other. All colleges and universities have customs and traditions, venerable and otherwise, and the University of Chicago has more than most. Appropriate to a university that was founded in 1890 as an engine of educational innovation, one of our most esteemed annual traditions involves thinking about and even debating the aims of liberal education. Each fall, in the week before classes, the new academic year is upon us with full force. We invite a senior faculty member to address the entering first-year class and transfer students with her or his thoughts about liberal education and its meaning and value to our lives. The general title accorded to these talks is adapted from Alfred North Whitehead's famous lecture on the aims of education, given in 1916 as a presidential address to the Mathematics Association in England. The annual Aims lectures on our campus began as a student initiative in the early 1960s, and over the decades, they have become a sturdy and I would say a venerable part of our common and shared history. It is thus part of that system of shared values and our common citizenship that I discussed in greeting you on the quadrangles yesterday afternoon. The first aims of education. It's a big chapel, a small mic. So, the first Aims of Education address was in fact a series of lectures on liberal education that were held during the 1961-1962 academic year. And an important feature of that event was the participation of President Robert Maynard Hutchins, who returned to our campus on the occasion, having retired from the presidency of the University of Chicago for nearly a decade. Hutchins spoke here in the chapel right there, in the spring of 1962 before a capacity audience, and he spoke as he had always done as president in defense of liberal learning. During his presidency, Robert Hutchins gave a decisive shape to the traditions and the ideals of liberal learning that still animate this college. And it is fitting that we honor his memory on this occasion and in this chapel. And the Aims of Education addresses are now published by the college in Hutchins' honor, thanks to the generous gifts of alumni and friends who celebrate his role in shaping our ideals and his work as president in our history. I should also mention that it is a central feature of this particular ritual that the Ames speaker is given absolutely no instructions or substantive guidance from the dean of the college or anyone else, other than informing her or him of the time and place at which this lecture will be held. To be invited to deliver the annual Ames address is a considerable honor, but also a daunting challenge. And it is no accident that most, if not all, of the Ames speakers in the past and the present have been colleagues not only esteemed as foremost scholars, but also as brilliant teachers. Our speaker this evening is Kimberly Kay Hoang, Associate Professor of Sociology and Director of our Global Studies program. Professor Hoang is a distinguished and prolific scholar whose first book, An Innovative Ethnography of Sex Work and Its Connections to the Global Economy in Southeast Asia, has won multiple distinguished book awards, and who was recently recognized by the American Sociological Association for the depth of her theoretical and methodological contributions. Her program of research elucidates the unexpected intersections of topics like global markets, gender identities, and politics, but it has also informed her energetic leadership of the college's Global Studies program, our Global Studies major, which guides students to analyze the interconnected and interdependent nature of the contemporary world and to trace the global resonances of phenomena in specific sites. Under Professor Hoang's direction, Global Studies has engaged resourcefully with our own urban context as well through Mapping Global Chicago Research Lab and other courses that discern the transnational elements of life in our city that you have now embraced as your city, as your hometown. Kimberly is not only an uncommonly imaginative scholar, but she is also a superb and dedicated teacher. In 2018, she was awarded the highest honor that the college could bestow in the Quantrell Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, reflecting her inspiring mentorship of hundreds of students and deep contributions to the undergraduate curriculum. Her citation for the award at that time made note of the, quote, unparalleled, unquote, and, quote, almost otherworldly, unquote, enthusiasm for topics that she generates in her classroom, and praised her combination of, quote, a steadfast and rigorous pedagogical style, unquote, with, quote, a fervor that bridges the gap between academia and real-life experiences, unquote, and reminds students that scholarship is so much more than just class reading. Great teaching lies at the heart of the central purpose of our university, and the efforts of our faculty over the past century to create and to define this great university's teaching traditions were often complex and conflicted and contested because they not only involved structural formalities, but because they were infused with a strong sense of pride and a profound sense that our work as educators should have a dramatic impact on the resilience of the fundamental values that define the university. Many years ago, a past Aims of Education lecturer and a distinguished humanist, Professor Jacques Weintraub, argued that teaching was not simply a way of valorizing the university's institutional mission, but also a confession of the power of the university in constituting the kind of world that we want to bequeath to the young people who come after us. Quote, a teacher finds this satisfaction, Jacques insisted, simply in having raised consciousness by one little notch. It may make all the difference. It may make all the difference between mediocrity and excellence. The quality of a culture depends ultimately on this sustained cultivation of sensitivities, of refined taste, of sound judgment. There is no cheap and easy way to culture. Much of the true cultural labor is not readily visible, but in this invisible labor lies the great contribution that a university makes to all that is visible to the larger public, end quote. The vocation of teaching has come to define the highest and best nature of the University of Chicago. And it is thus my great pleasure and a high honor for me to be able to introduce a great teacher, my distinguished colleague and friend, Kimberly Kay Hoang, who will deliver the 2021 address on the aims of education.
It's so wonderful to look out at some of you here, and I wish that there were more students who are viewing this virtually that I could see in person. Welcome to the University of Chicago. I want to start by first saying congratulations. This has no doubt been a challenging year and a half with what feels like a pileup of crises as they relate to the COVID-19 global pandemic, civil unrest in the struggle against racial injustice, devastating wildfires and hurricanes brought on by climate change, the insurrection, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years after 9/11, heightened awareness around mental health struggles around the world, and so much more. The fact that you're here and that you not only survived but thrived after an incredibly challenging year of high school or work is a testament that you are the most resilient class ever. I can't tell you how excited and thrilled my colleagues and I are to welcome all of you to campus after a long stretch of physical distancing and remote learning. As a small campus, the magic of this place comes from the intellectual firepower that is only possible when we're gathered in person. The energy, curiosity, and diverse perspectives that you contribute bring this place to life. I must say that convening in formal attire this year in the Rockefeller Chapel feels especially meaningful because over the past 18 months, I've almost grown accustomed to seeing many students attend classes in their pajamas. And so it feels great to look out at a crowd of people dressed to the nines. You all look stunning tonight. And I feel really energized by your presence already, even though it's a small group here in front of me. It's an honor for me to be delivering this year's Aims of Education address. This is something quite unique, to be addressing you at the start of your college career rather than at the end. This is the beginning of what I hope will be the first of many stimulating interactions that will take you on an incredible journey. The address is supposed to be about the aims of education, but as a sociologist, I hesitate to offer a definitive answer as all perspectives are informed by history and past experience. Thus, my answer is informed by my unique background as a first-generation college student from a working-class family and the daughter of Vietnamese refugees who fled a war-torn country at the end of a long war in the 1970s. When I look back, I remember my first day stepping foot on a college campus. I was filled with so much hope, excitement, and optimism, but I was also nervous. I'm actually really nervous right now. I had no idea what to expect from my roommates, my professors, and all of the new people in this new social world. But I was in a new environment where suddenly anything felt possible. And I look back at that college time as a time filled with all sorts of new discoveries. In this address, I warmly and humbly invite you to conceive of your time at the University of Chicago as a time to engage in 3 forms of discovery: self, social, and scientific. So let me start with self-discovery, which is arguably one of the most selfish yet important things that you can do. This is a time when you get to strip away parts of who you were raised to be by your parents, extended family members, community members, and really ask yourself, who do you want to be? What are your passions? What are the world problems you want to be part of solving? What matters to you? What keeps you up at night? What are you called upon to do with your unique gifts in this world? With more than 4.5 million COVID deaths worldwide, this pandemic has taught us that life is short and precious. And if you only get one life, how do you want to live it? How do you want to spend your days? So let me tell you a bit about how I answered those questions. I could have never imagined in a million years that I would become a professor at a small, private, elite university in the Midwest with arguably, the smartest group of students from around the world who push my thinking to new heights every year. But even before this, I could have never imagined that I would complete a PhD. My path to discovering academia as a potential career was not conventional. So let me explain. My parents never went to college, and for years growing up, they ran a billiard hall that catered to single men, both refugees and immigrants, who did not have families of their own. I saw the same men come in every weekend from morning to close, many of them on weekdays, and would spend most of their time shooting pool and betting large sums of money with each other. And when I was younger, I saw them through an individualistic, moral lens as lazy, unrespectable, and for the most part, useless. But it wasn't until I got to college that I began to understand these men's stories through what C. Wright Mills calls the sociological imagination. It was then that I began to understand that the personal troubles each individual man faced in that billiard were part of larger economic, social, and political contexts. Their private travails were public issues that reflected patterns of US imperialism, the aftermath of a long war that was drawn out over 20 years with so many parallels to Afghanistan today, a changing US economy, immigration patterns, and gendered transformations. The home that I grew up in was extremely patriarchal. As the oldest daughter, my place at the dinner table was right next to the rice cooker. There I learned to serve my father, my mother, and all of my siblings. And unlike many of my Asian American friends, as a young woman, I was strongly discouraged from pursuing higher education. In my social world at the time, women went to college to meet decent guys and get their MRS degrees. So in that context, a bachelor's degree was fine, but a doctorate degree was something I was discouraged from pursuing. There was so much noise around me. I was told not only by my parents, but so many people in my home community that knowledge was power and a PhD would make me too intimidating for any man to want to marry. What man would want to marry a woman who was smarter or better pedigreed than him? And what was the point of getting a PhD if I would eventually have to give up my career to take care of my family and children later in life. Men and women alike warned me that if I chose this career path, I would have to give up any dreams of having a family of my own one day. And to be fair, my parents weren't totally off base. This kind of messaging was all over the place. In fact, true story, when I was an assistant professor, I was dating this guy who I was super smitten about. And one night, over an extremely nice dinner, he dumped me and explained to me that he felt like I used words that were too big for him. Who knew that satiated was a big word, right? I attended UC Santa Barbara, a beautiful school along the coast of California known for being a big party school, probably the opposite of what the University of Chicago is known for. Being in a university setting exposed me to a whole other worldview. For the first time in my life, I got to learn about women doing cutting-edge research across the STEM fields and the social sciences. I discovered female professors like Tejal Desai, who at the time won a Visionary Science Award and who was named one of the top 10 scientists in the nation. Dr. Desai now runs a lab dedicated to optimizing drug delivery. But she wasn't the only one. Professor Sangeeta Bahita, trained as a physician and biomedical engineer, runs a lab dedicated to leveraging microtechnologies to treat and diagnose cancer, among many other diseases. She also happened to be a passionate advocate for diversity in science and engineering. In the humanities and social sciences, I found myself getting lost in the works of feminist scholars engaged in cutting-edge historical and social science research that examined gender and power through an intersectional and global lens. Theory, as my colleagues at the university here are obsessed with, comes from the Greek word meaning to look or to see. And feminist theories articulated different ways of seeing and understanding women's lives and the socially constructed dynamics of gender inequality. While much of this work has come under attack today as ideology and not science, the truth is so many women have pioneered data-driven work across multiple fields. This is because they've brought new ways of seeing to data, not despite it. I was most inspired by anthropologists like Gail Rubin and Susan Gall, biologists like Amanda Adelier, historians like Amy Drew Stanley, legal scholars like Martha Nussbaum, political scientists like Kathy Cohen and Linda Zarelli, sociologists like Kristen Schilt, and the late Lauren Berlant, a leading feminist scholar whom we all miss so dearly. These women and non-binary gender scholars produced rigorous, data-driven research to show how gendered relations have operated across time, organizational structure, culture, and political regimes. And what blows my mind is that half of these people on my list are my colleagues and your professors. At the time, I could have only imagined or dreamed of getting to meet any one of them, let alone to get to take a class with them. But you all have that extraordinary privilege right here on this campus. In fact, I'm still learning so much from them because all of these people today have inspired me on my own journey of self-discovery. Reading and engaging their works opened my mind to seeing other possibilities beyond the deeply patriarchal worldview that I grew up in from my childhood. This past Tuesday, I got to deliver a welcome address to a group of graduate students on campus, and it reminded me that you have them too. I spoke briefly with Kimberly Liu, a fourth year in applied mathematics, working at the intersection of neuroscience and computational neuroscience and machine learning. Not my area, but how cool is that? I will also say that they helped me imagine a life where I would not have to choose between family and a career with an ambitious research agenda. In fact, I'm married to a brilliant social scientist, and over this pandemic, we had a baby girl who we named Evelyn. She's quickly learning how to use her voice at all hours of the night. In fact, last night I was up with her at 2 a.m. as she was babbling away. Who knew that teething was so hard? That was my unique journey of self-discovery that started in college, but I must say continues to evolve over my life course. And I hope that during the time you spend here, you will get to take a deep dive into a wide variety of data-backed research that will not only shift your worldviews, but inspire a new way of thinking and a critical lens to take with you in whatever careers you ultimately pursue. If there's one piece of advice that I wish I could give my college-age self, it would be that everyone's journey is different. And at the end, everyone arrives on their own time. Life is not linear, and if it would be, there would be nothing to discover. If you take this journey of self-discovery seriously, you will pave your own path that brings your own unique interests together. Let me shift now to talk about social discovery. As a sociologist who's interested in the study of people and our society, I can't help but think about how one's journey of discovery is relational. Let me explain what I mean by relational. When we think about intelligence, discovery, or innovation, we often think of this stereotypical person wandering the forest, deep in thought, contemplating the meaning of life, only to find discovery like being hit by a lightning bolt. But from a sociological perspective, the world doesn't quite work that way. For sociologists, intelligence, discovery, and innovation is driven by the people whom we're around, the people with whom we interact, especially those whose views are different from our own. At the University of Chicago, your journey of social discovery is bound to be relational. You will learn from the intimate and impassioned debates and conversations with classmates, especially in our core curriculum, and what riches you'll find all around to guide your discovery. One infamous phrase that has been used to characterize these kinds of relational experiences is UChicago is the place where fun goes to die. And in preparation for this address, I met virtually with a group of incoming students, much like you here today, and learned that some of them chose to attend UChicago precisely because of this reputation. When I asked them what it meant, Eric, an incoming student from San Diego, said that he really enjoys the late nights with friends trying to solve math problem sets and the sense of social discovery that comes with doing this together. To the outside world, UChicago students have the reputation of being the opposite of Harvard students. Rather than joining a bunch of social networking clubs, Chicago students are supposedly awkward, super nerds who take their academics so seriously they're incapable of fun. This very identity is one that not only students take on, but also that faculty takes seriously. In fact, if I'm honest, it's what drew me to the University of Chicago. I wanted to be around people who were willing to do everything it takes to produce the most rigorous and cutting-edge research. I went down that path during my first 6 years here, on my pathway to tenure, only to learn that it's not only unhealthy, it's unproductive. Let me share a secret. Those that have been around here long enough can attest to this. The truth is that some of my most creative and innovative work has come from finding joy and community with other people on this journey of discovery. What pushed my thinking the most were the deeply engaging conversations that I had with students in the classroom, in my office hours, and while we were away together at UChicago's global centers in Paris, Hong Kong, Delhi, and Beijing. In my many years here, I've seen one too many students take that infamous motto so seriously that it's been detrimental to their mental health. That actually forced me to take a step back and really interrogate the idea that great work and brilliant ideas are solely the product of killing fun or joy. It's so important for you to discover what brings you joy and use that as a guide to move you forward on your own path of social discovery. You've all made it here, so let go of that brute competition and find ways to build each other up and help each other on a path of social discovery that's only possible when we're open, connected, and supportive of each other. What makes the University of Chicago so incredible is that it's a world-class university with people coming from all around the globe, from big cities and small rural communities within the United States. In the small group I met virtually in preparation for this address, there was May from New Jersey, Sophia from Minnesota, Raquel and Kiana from California, Joseph and Austin from Miami, Henry from Michigan, among others. But there were also 3 students, Shane, Cade, and Samuel, here who are part of the Veterans Program after serving in the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marines. Just by being here, you get to be in conversation with them and learn from one another. You get to open yourself up to worldviews that are very different from your own as you discover your ever-evolving ones. Another key characteristic of the University of Chicago's relational experience is its emphasis on independent inquiry and freedom of expression. One of the university's fundamental values is open discourse that exposes students to multiple perspectives. The University of Chicago takes seriously the battle of ideas that feeds the life of the mind and drives the discovery of new knowledge. In your journeys of social discovery, I encourage you to approach this fundamental value in a relational manner, which means seriously interrogating what freedom of expression means in theory versus practice. In theory, free expression at its best is about diversity, inclusion, and exposure to people from all walks of life. It's about celebrating our differences even when it makes us uncomfortable. In theory, this also assumes that we live in a world, in an equal world, unfettered by power relations. In practice, as I'm sure you'll all realize, the reality of expression is nuanced, messy, and always relational. We know that some voices are not only louder, but they're more powerful than others. And the weight of that power can effectively create a silencing effect that does not foster freedom of expression on equal grounds. Indeed, it could be lopsided or distorted so as to impede on the freedom of inquiry that is our raison d'etre in higher education. As a professor in the classroom environment, there are many questions about the potential limits of freedom of expression. Can anybody just say whatever they want? What is the difference, for example, between speech that constitutes harassment, hate speech, or offensive speech? In essence, if the essence is that students should expose themselves to offensive speech and create a compelling counter-discourse, then in theory, all students should feel capable and empowered to speak up at all times, regardless of how unpopular their ideas are. But it's also important to recognize moments when speech hinders our ability to listen to a truly diverse set of perspectives and learn something valuable. Institutions like the University of Chicago are made up of people. We have our values and our cultures, and now you're part of this place. You will play an important role in shaping this environment around us. And as you enter this space, I would invite you to think relationally about social discovery as it relates to freedom of expression. Who will be on the receiving end of your freedom of expression? Who has the power or freedom to ignore your speech, and who doesn't? And if we so value diversity and inclusion, whose speech are you going to give weight, recognition, and respect to? Inclusion is not something that just happens. It's something that requires thoughtfulness, care, mutual recognition, and sacrificing privilege for sometimes those who are less privileged. It requires that we ask ourselves, especially in the classroom, when am I talking too much? When am I taking up too much space? When do I need to listen more so that I can hear and understand where my classmates are coming from? And students need to do this for selfish reasons too, to grow personally and intellectually. On a relational level, this requires compassion, empathy, and understanding that the people around us are constantly evolving on their own journey of self-discovery. What they say, tweet, or post in one moment may not reflect who they grow to become during their time here. So we as an intellectual community must constantly ask, what do we need to do to create space where everyone can contribute and where all values are equally heard? We also need to be generous to each other to foster trust on which collaborative discovery rests. Let me move to scientific discovery. As we move from the micro to the macro, from the self to the social, I would like to now invite you on a journey of scientific discovery. This is, after all, a research university, where many of the faculty are involved in detecting, observing, and understanding new phenomena. We're in the business of advancing knowledge, shifting paradigms, and making radical breakthroughs with new technologies. Many of you have started this already on your own journey of scientific discovery in high school or at work, with an assortment of new experiments and thought projects and innovative designs. Let me share with you a bit about my own journey of scientific discovery. With a lot of mentoring on the part of my former professors, I decided to pursue a PhD in sociology at UC Berkeley. There, I carried out original research in Southeast Asia on women identified as victims of sex trafficking. At that time, nonprofit organizations, religious institutions, and the public were invested in raising awareness around this issue. Feminist scholars who I greatly respected theorized this as one of the most extreme forms of gender exploitation. However, there wasn't a lot of rigorous research on the topic, and sex trafficking statistics were hard to come by given the underground nature of the phenomena. But we also did not know very much about the social, economic, and political conditions that made women so vulnerable. Then, journalists and academics alike wrote about poor third world women in the global south in need of rescue. So I decided to move to Vietnam, where I carried out nearly 2 years of ethnographic research to study this phenomenon. For 15 months, I worked as a hostess and bartender in 4 different bars that were seen by outsiders as sex trafficking hotspots. However, as I got deep into the field research, the data and the evidence that I gathered made me realize that I entered the field with a worldview and a set of misguided assumptions about women that were not only wrong, they were harmful to their lives. For instance, when I asked women why they were working as sex workers in these hostess bars, nearly all of them told me that this was a choice and one that provided them with higher pay and more viable forms of upward mobility when compared to other options like work as maids or in garment factories, places where they were far more vulnerable to exploitation and rape and often had to work longer hours for less pay. What I later came to realize was that we needed new theoretical and analytical tools to grapple with what I was finding. But there was even more. I went to this field thinking that I would find men looking to exploit their fetishes of Asian women as submissive, docile, and hypersexual. Instead, what I found was a group of Western men negotiating a deep sense of Western decline in a context where the United States and Europe were mired in the 2008 global financial crisis. This also happened to be a time when Western economies were stagnating while East and Southeast Asian economies were rapidly on the rise and incredibly dynamic. So much so that the vast majority of foreign direct investment going into small countries like Vietnam was coming primarily from other East and Southeast Asian nations like China, Hong Kong, and South Korea. Not very much was coming from Western nations like the United States and Europe. These economic transformations I discovered were tightly woven into the social and cultural fabric. The local sex industry became a critical space to look at how gender facilitates the movement of money into the nation. So the study in the end reveals how a group of women we once thought of as helpless victims actually played an important role in shaping the movement of money into Vietnam's formal economy. In a context where few people had faith in rule of law, hostess bars became critical sites where men relied on the labors of women to help facilitate relations of trust and broker business deals. But publishing these new findings was no easy feat. As it turned out, when I returned to the United States, it would take me years to publish much of this work, because it was hard for people to imagine a world in which women would choose to enter sex work, where men followed a strict moral order that guided these bars, where the West was on the decline while East and Southeast Asian economies were incredibly dynamic, and where efforts to rescue these women by nonprofit organizations and religious institutions actually put these women's lives at greater danger than did the actions of their male patrons. Still, I felt like it was important to find a way to articulate my findings in a way that stayed true to the data, regardless of how unpopular they were at the time. The data and the evidence had to speak for itself, and anything short of that would be a disservice to my research subjects and a failure to advance knowledge in the social sciences. As I reflect on my own journey of scientific discovery now, I realize that it aligns with UChicago's tradition of confronting uncomfortable insights. As you embark on your own journey of discovery that will likely challenge your evolving assumptions, let me talk a bit about some of the ways you might consider joining many of the professors here in a collaborative project. In my move to the University of Chicago, I decided to embark on a new research project for my forthcoming book, titled Spiderweb Capitalism: How Global Elites Exploit Frontier Markets. For that project, I had the privilege to work with 13 incredibly talented UChicago undergraduate students. 5 of them traveled with me to Vietnam, Hong Kong, and Singapore to collect data, while the other 8 helped me organize and analyze much of the data. The students got firsthand experience of what it's like to work in the field, carry out interviews, transcribe audio recordings, code and analyze the data. We spent hours thinking through the emergent themes and patterns, and their energy and intellectual curiosity helped carry the project forward. And they used this rich experience as a springboard and went on to forge their own unique paths. None of them do exactly what I do, but they're doing things that are arguably far more interesting. One student, Gaurav Kalwani, went on to forge a career in public service as a Carnegie Junior Fellow, where he worked as a research assistant on nuclear policy questions. Kwa Di Phan has gone on to pursue a PhD in sociology at Northwestern, where he is carrying out research at the intersection of gender, sexuality, family, and law. Lucas Pinedo served on the editorial board of the Chicago Journal of Sociology and eventually went on to work at a nonprofit affordable housing equity fund. These stories exemplify just one narrow area where we found a way to contribute to the field. But today, there are many other pressing global issues and local problems for you to try to tackle. As you think about forging your own journey here, think about the research teams that you might want to be part of that will enrich your intellectual journey. You have arrived at this university where our core mission requires a vigorous defense. This is a research community where we're collectively motivated by an investment in data, research, and science. But the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed a legitimacy crisis as it relates to evidence-based research and science at the highest levels of government. Over the past few months, we've seen physicians fighting a two-front crisis: a public battle over the legitimacy of their work and motivation, and an assault on public health that undermines our efforts to defeat COVID-19. The dual crisis, I would argue, requires an interdisciplinary approach on the part of virologists, chemists, epidemiologists, physicians, and social scientists working to fight this pandemic, but also asking why so many communities are reluctant to trust data and evidence-based science. It requires us to grapple with the ways that science has been used in nefarious ways to undermine that trust, particularly in low-income, rural, and minority communities. Consider the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in African American men. This ethically abusive study, carried out between 1932 and 1972 by the United States Public Health Service and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention on a group of 600 African American men in Alabama, 399 with syphilis, 201 who did not have the disease. The purpose of the study was to examine the effects of the disease when left untreated. These men were not informed of the nature of the experiment. They were promised free medical care, and they were told that the experiment would only last 6 months when it extended 40 years. And 10 years later, by 1943, when penicillin was widely available as a form of treatment, many of the participants were not even offered it. Similarly, experimentation with atomic bombs was carried out between 1946 and 1962 by the United States government that resulted in more than 1,000 nuclear tests on unknowing US servicemen who were exposed to ionizing radiation while present in a site of nuclear explosion. The servicemen, now known as atomic veterans, were forced to take an oath of secrecy. Hank Bolden, an atomic veteran, told a reporter that they wanted to see how live soldiers would stand up to being exposed to radiation. To be sure, we've come a long way since then. We've learned a great deal from these past mistakes. We've built better frameworks for more ethical research practices that protect our human subjects, and we're continuing to evolve as we question and improve our research methods. But still, that history surely shapes our current moment. My fellow sociologist, Philip Cohen at the University of Maryland, has analyzed data from the US Census Bureau Household Pulse Survey data, looking at COVID-19 vaccination rates. What he found was that the individuals who are getting vaccinated at higher rates or in greater proportions are in households with incomes above $150,000 per year. They're white and Asian and hold bachelor's degrees. While vaccination rates are much lower for those in households where incomes are below $25,000 a year, Hispanic or African American, people serving in the military, and those with less than a high school education. These are complex examples and problems that require not just research and evidence-backed science, but an understanding of the social, historical, and cultural contexts that shape how people make sense of the kind of knowledge we're working so hard to produce. This is most pertinent for low-income and minority communities. But I remain hopeful that we'll find ways to reach across disciplines to advance science while also working to better inform the public in ways that not only restores the legitimacy, but also trust in science. So let me end here with a few closing remarks. As you embark on this journey of self, social, and scientific discovery, I hope that you'll fall in love with yourself, with each other, with the city of Chicago, and the world of new knowledge that will also play an important role in solving some of the world's most pressing problems. I hope that you will celebrate each other's differences and successes by giving those whose views are different from yours the benefit of the doubt. We must all remember to exercise compassion for ourselves and others as we fail and make mistakes along the way. Over the next few years, I hope that you find joy, laughter, and love. And while it may be intimidating to be around so many brilliant scholars, super talented peers, never forget that you are here too. You matter, and you have so much to contribute in ways that will surely surprise yourself. This morning at 3 a.m., as I was desperately trying to get my daughter to go back to sleep, I was so desperate given tonight's address, I turned on a baby lullaby station, and the song from I Am Moana came on, titled Song of the Ancestors. The lyrics seem fitting for my remarks today, so these are from Evelyn, my daughter. The journey may leave a scar, but scars can heal and reveal just where you are. The people you love will change you. The things you learned will guide you. And nothing on earth can silence that quiet voice still inside you. As I look out at all of you in the audience, I'm hopeful and confident that you will change the world that my daughter will grow up in for the better. You are, after all, the most resilient class ever. I wish you nothing but the best as you begin this journey, and I can't wait to meet some of you in person. Thank you.
Thank you for a most thoughtful, engaged, and highly stimulating talk. And our custom now is that we're going to return to the residence halls. Some of you are already in the residence halls, and continue the conversation about the very important and controversial, but deeply important and transformational issues that Professor Hoang has raised today. I want to close by wishing all of you again a stimulating, a safe, and a productive year, one in which you help each other as well as you advance your own intellectual cause and your own intellectual interests. Stay in touch with each other, stay in touch with your families. Let us know how we can help you. But welcome to the college, welcome to the university again, and I thank you for coming, and a great evening to all of you. Thank you.